Hi Lisa, I'm making a video response because I couldn't fit my comments into the text comments box. First of all, I wanted to say I'm again very happy that you made a video on a serious subject, even though I really love your comedy videos. So I just wanted to say that I have kind of a dual, response to the whole subject of group mentality and groupthink. On the one hand, I totally agree with what you're saying about being wary of groups, of just going along with something because everyone else thinks it, or doing something just because everyone else is doing it, or doing it unthinkingly. I think it's really critical for human beings to think of every action independently. Basically just stop for a moment and decide whether you really think through like what you're doing, why you're doing it, does it make sense. I think that's really important. My own family, I remember hearing stories about my great-grandfather who lived in Japan, and he opposed the Japanese government when they decided to go to war. He thought it was a stupid war. He thought it was idiotic, a waste, a terrible tragedy. And even though we're from a samurai background, or maybe partially because we were from a samurai, we had a samurai history, he felt he could, he could resist the government, and so he sent his son to America, and once the war was over, he sent my father to America, his grandson. And but there's an irony there, because he felt empowered to resist because he identified with a different group, which was sort of his samurai background, and the government at the time he felt had betrayed the ancient virtues and the values of the samurai, even though they talked about it all the time. They would talk about the warrior spirit and so forth, but they really didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. And he knew that, and he was saying, this isn't the way, this isn't the right way. I have the same kind of dual relationship. I mean, on the one hand, I totally believe that you have to think for yourself and resist the temptation just to do something because everyone's doing it. But at the same time, I was taught that by my parents. I was taught that as part of my culture. I mean, and identify with other people who are independent-minded, in a strange way. And I draw a lot of sense of empowerment from them, and from not just my family or my heritage, but also my dad is an artist, and he my parents used to live in Greenwich Village, and my dad, you can see some of my dad's artwork. We put it up on the wall recently because my parents were visiting. We had an anniversary party for them, and and of course artists and the kind of the art world is very independent-minded, and so in an odd way I feel validated by that. I feel validated by the sort of independent-minded samurai and the independent-minded artists, and my parents who taught me to think for myself. I mean, they actually encouraged me to challenge them, to challenge what they said and what they thought, and they took what I said seriously. So I learned to challenge my own parents, and they were proud of that. So it's kind of, I sort of feel as though rebelling against things when you think that they're wrong is something that I actually think of as a traditional value. It's not, and as part of the group that I'm a part of values that, and that group is not just my family, but every person who thinks for themselves. My friends and the culture of thinking for yourself, I think, is a group in a way, you know, and I think we can draw support from each other, you know, even if we don't always agree with each other on other things. A lot of my friends in college were very left-wing, and I am pretty much a liberal, but at the same time, there are things that I didn't agree with them about, you know. They would always criticize the U.S., which I agreed with most of their criticisms of things we had done wrong, you know, the Vietnam War or massacres or supporting dictators in other countries and so forth. But at the same time, I also felt, you know, the Soviet Union deserved to be criticized, and when they did terrible things, and a lot of my friends didn't seem to care about things that our enemies did. And I just thought, you know, we're all humans. We should criticize. I should criticize what my samurai ancestors did. Even though I'm proud of that, I criticize my parents. I criticize my friends. I criticize my own country. I criticize other countries. And I think it's important to sort of come to your own judgment. You know, it's kind of ironic. Like in Buddhism, there's a sutra which is a very traditional sutra. It's, you know, and what the sutra says is that the founder of Buddhism actually said, you know, don't believe things just because they're traditionally believed. Don't believe things just because you know, everyone thinks it. Don't believe it just because some old revered monk says it's so. You know, think for yourself and determine whether it makes sense. And if it does make sense, then you should follow it. And I think it's kind of ironic that, you know, they're at the center of this particular cultural or philosophical movement is an admonition to think for yourself and not to just accept what they're saying just because you know, some old teachers are saying it, or some monks, or some you know, or just because everybody in your community thinks something is true. So I actually think so. That's basically what I wanted to say, and you know, I mean, I also wanted to mention that, you know, I'm a Japanese American. I was born in the U.S., but at the same time, you know, it's different being a minority. I mean, you do feel different, you know, not just because of the way I look, but also because of my culture. My family culture is different from, you know, the average American family, and I think that I do derive some sense of support from my ethnic background and my heritage, and I feel some, you know, resonance with Japanese culture and with Japan, even though I'm, you know, much more of an American than Japanese. So, you know, I sort of have, like, I'm sort of two minds about it, you know. I think there's something very valid about thinking about the group, about supporting your friends, supporting people in your community, you know, being part of something, but at the same time thinking for yourself and not just following along just because everybody is doing it. That's basically all I had to say.